And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, today joined by somebody who we had planned to have this conversation with. We had it all lined up. We were like ready to go. And then Damian Lillard gets traded. So we don't get to, we don't wind up having the Lakers conversation that we planned on having. You guys got to watch, if you were watching or if you have watched the episode already, you watched Jason and I completely freak out. Both of us thinking, like, I got to credit you first off. And Jason Timpf of The Volume, who does incredible work for that challenge. But I got to credit you because a lot of people would, given that this is your job as well, would have said, at the very least, hey man, like, do you mind cutting like in like 10 minutes? I had to go. But you hung in there for the entirety of the episode. I really greatly appreciated that. Jason, thank you very much for hopping on with us. I'm looking forward to having the conversation we were going to have a week ago.
Yeah, we're now irrevocably attached to the Dame Lillard storyline, man. Every time I see him in a Bucks jersey, I'm going to think about that show. Honestly, it was fine because it was such an incredibly splashy, unexpected move that I almost needed to sit there and just kind of process it for an hour anyway. So we just got to do that live on the air, which was totally fine. And we got our instant reaction later that afternoon. It was all good, dude. And again, that's just part of the process. But I'm cautiously optimistic that today we'll actually get to talk about the things we want to talk about.
Well, so James Harden is the only person I can think of where that would happen again. And he practiced today. Without the fat suit, according to multiple reports. So I think we're okay. I think we're all right. But yeah, today we are going to talk about the Lakers. We are going to deep dive into their season. You've been doing preseason power rankings for Hoops Tonight, which again you can subscribe to everywhere you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. And I'm going to ask you where you have the Lakers in that ranking now that the Damian Lillard trade has actually happened. I want to ask some kind of big macro questions about them that you might have about the team and all of that good stuff. So here we go. Where do you have in your Hoops Tonight power rankings, where do you have the Lakers? You don't have to give away the exact spot, but are they still a top 5 team to you?
Yes. I think there's 6 clear teams at the top of the league.
Okay.
And that is, I know Lakers fans might disagree because there's a little animosity between the two fan bases, but the same starting 5 that won the title literally less than, what has it been, like 16 months ago. The same starting 5 that won the title 16 months ago still plays for Golden State. So it would not be respectful or fair, in my opinion, to write them off completely. So I have them at number 6. And then I think they're kind of on that tier, but clearly at the bottom in the sense that they'd be an underdog against. They're barely hanging on. It's really just respect to Steph Curry. And maybe if Wiggins doesn't go AWOL in the middle of the season and maybe Chris Paul pans out, it can work. But then I think the top 5 are clearly just a little bit better than the Warriors. And all of them have different things that they bring to the table. Specifically, Phoenix and Milwaukee bring that top tier offensive skill. That's that Damian Lillard. That's that, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker thing. Right. And then the Nuggets and the Lakers bring the incredible physicality to the table and the matchup attacking, and we're going to beat you up inside. And the Lakers are more of a defensive version of that. And the Nuggets are more of an offensive version of that. And then the Bucks are kind of a little bit of both. And, they all kind of have a unique punch. And so the separators there are all going to be the intangible things, in my opinion. It's going to be which teams have the better coaches, which teams are more committed to the dirty work, overall chemistry, locker room chemistry, basketball synergy, injuries, luck. All those things are going to be the differentiators. And what freaks me out a little bit with the Suns, because I have the Suns at 5. And then I have the Lakers at 4 before I get to the Celtics, the Bucks, and the Nuggets at the top. And the reason why I give the Lakers a very slight edge over the Suns is because of the fact that they are both talented, physically imposing, and they have a commitment to the work.
Yeah.
They, down the roster from day one of camp, are going to set and establish habits that are proven to work in the NBA playoffs, defending, competing, rebounding, all those sorts of things, right? The Suns, they don't have a single above average starter on the roster who's a defender, someone whose career has been, I defend and I rebound. They have a ton of talent, and I do think people try to galaxy brain the offensive end a little bit. Like, they're going to score a ton.
Yeah.
But like I've seen people compare them to the Brooklyn Nets with Harden, Kyrie, and KD. They had Nick Claxton, who was one of the best defensive fulcrums in the league. Like, he's probably in the top 10, 15 guys you'd want at the center position in the league defensively or as a rebounder, right? And then the Warriors with KD, Steph, and Clay, you had the Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala front line that they would go to at times too. So like, this Suns team, I think is incredibly talented, but I'm concerned about how they'll be in the differentiating factors of the game. Frank Vogel is a defensive-minded coach. Maybe he comes in and establishes those habits and it all works out. But right now, I think the Lakers have a slight edge over the Suns as the second best team in the West.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. The Suns have so much firepower that if you're in a close game with them, you're going to be absolutely terrified because a good shot is going to come from somewhere on that court. But on the other end of things, Suns fans are going to live terrified because they aren't going to get any stops.
Not.
The one guy who I thought could have functioned as a bit of an anchor to the defense would have been Ayton. Now he's gone, and Nurkic isn't that kind of a player. Maybe Vogel optimizes him, right? He was able to optimize Roy Hibbert. Maybe he'll be able to do something with Nurkic. But yeah, I completely agree with having the Lakers second in the conference behind a Nuggets team that probably got a little bit worse, but Jokic is so good and so uniquely talented at maximizing everybody around him that I'm not positive losing Bruce Brown and Jeff Green is definitely going to hurt them. So I still have the Nuggets up there. I have the Lakers, tangibly behind them, notably behind them. And then you have the Suns and the Warriors. But with the Lakers, though, I kind of wanted to start with, like you mentioned, the various identities here. And this is actually something I love about the NBA right now is, in boxing, styles might make fights. And you look at any great matchup that we're going to watch on a nightly basis here with those top six teams, and it's going to be a clash of identities almost every single time two of those teams get together. What do you think the Lakers' identity should be this year? Because that's the part of this that I have found myself thinking about the most is we know what identity LeBron and AD have won with before. We know what identity Darvin Ham would kind of sort of prefer. They're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle there. And depending on what that identity might be, that will allow them, I think, to optimize the roster. But what do you think their identity should be?
I think their identity should be we're the team that's going to kick your ass in a rock fight. Like we're gonna slow the pace down. We're gonna play half court basketball. We're going to pound the ball inside. We're going to attack matchups all day long. We're going to pick on your small guards with D'Lo post-ups and have Austin put them in pick and roll. LeBron's going to pick on your skinny wings and take him to the basket. Anthony Davis obviously is one of the biggest matchup nightmares in the league at his position. I think that's kind of the idea that they're going for. I think the defensive identity is going to be key because this team has to be the best defense by far out of those top five teams in order to separate themselves. If they defend just as well as the Celtics or just as well as the Bucks, they're going to lose. They need to defend at a higher level than that. And that's where it gets a little tricky because this team does lack perimeter defense. Mm-hmm. And it's weird because they have a legitimate, borderline top tier, maybe second tier perimeter defender in Jared Vanderbilt. In terms of guys who can guard opposing wings and guards and navigate ball screens and apply back pressure and defend in isolation and bother guys down low and up top.
You throw him on somebody, he breaks their rhythm.
Exactly. And here's the thing. He's been working really hard all summer and improving his offensive polish, and maybe that ends up making the difference. But we found out last year that whether it was the corner threes or operating out of the dunker spot, he just couldn't be enough of a threat offensively. Yeah. And so they're in a little bit of a predicament where their best perimeter defender is very clearly not one of their 5 best players. And that puts you into some problems. And I don't know if Darvin Ham's going to do more switching to try to address that. I don't know if he's just going to cross his fingers and hope that Rui Hachimura can defend on the perimeter, which I don't think is a philosophy that's going to work. But at the end of the day, someone's got to step up and be able to guard on the perimeter. And like, that's where I could see minutes being available. Like, we think of, Taurean Prince and Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt for that 3 spot. And we think about Gabe Vincent coming off the bench, right? But like, don't be surprised if a guy like Max Christie ends up getting significant minutes this year if he just shows that he's willing to compete on the defensive end, because they need to have somebody that can guard opposing pick and roll ball handlers and at least make it difficult enough to where they have to get downhill into the paint where the Lakers' interior defense can separate themselves. And that's going to be the challenge. And like, I don't know if it's not a problem in the regular season, in my opinion. I think this team's going to win a lot of regular season games. I think that when we talk about the offseason and what they accomplished in free agency and in the draft, there's this weird debate where it's like everyone's saying, oh, they had a great offseason. And then there's all these Celtics fans and other Nor'easters who are like, actually, the Lakers offseason wasn't any good because they didn't get any materially better. And I think everyone's kind of missing the point. Like, obviously, they didn't improve the issues they need to address in order to beat a team like Denver. Like they got to get over the top shot making.
I don't think
that's on LeBron and AD. I don't think you can. Like, where was the move? Like, there was no move. Like, and that's the thing. Like, to Rob Pelinka's credit, he didn't go for the home run because there wasn't a home run there to be had.
Yeah,
he just hit a bunch of singles this summer, and I loved that. He got legitimate regular season depth to carry this team. But I do think they're missing. I think the only realistic way, barring absolute luck with injuries, that they could end up with a trophy in their hands at the end of the day is if either LeBron and AD just flash back to 2020 as jump shooters, which who knows, maybe that happens, or they're going to have to get aggressive at the deadline and bring in either a really good over-the-top shot maker or an outstanding perimeter defender that they can play at the 2 or the 3 that elevates their defense to the point where suddenly they can beat teams with just impenetrable defense. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, I think it's going to be an interesting season from the standpoint of like separating what is regular season results, which should be overwhelmingly positive, to can we beat the top dogs in the league as currently constructed? And that's going to be what they're going to have to navigate throughout the year.
It legitimately hurts me how perfect KCP would be for this team. Like,
ain't that right, man?
It hurts my soul because when you're talking about like the kind of defender that the Lakers could really use, you could slide Austin over to the 1. You could put KCP in there at the 2. He could defend your the bigger shooting guards that I think are going to give the Lakers problems this year. Like Anthony Edwards, the night that he plays the Lakers, you're probably going to want to take the over on how many points he's going to score that night. Because like, if the Lakers are going to stick to like unless Jared Vanderbilt's going to play a whole bunch of minutes, he's going to fare quite well. And KCP also had some success guarding smaller guards by playing off and then closing the space with his length that he has on those guys. And not having him or having a player like him is like when people ask me. I had somebody ask me the other day, your intel on D'Angelo Russell. All summer I was saying that the Lakers are signing him to eventually trade him at the deadline. And I think there's still some to that. That noise kind of died down a little bit. I think the Lakers are really hoping that he works out and that and he even mentioned this year that because he had a kid, he didn't do as much traveling, so he got in the gym a little earlier. He said that his approach to defending is more team-based this year. He's acknowledged that he's not going to get any faster at this point in his career, so he's going to be more of a team defender. We'll see what that kind of looks like. But still, if the Lakers are going to take that next step into the category of like legitimately there with Denver, legitimately there with Milwaukee, legitimately there with even Boston right now, they're going to have to pick up a KCP type shooting guard, I think, to finish up their top 5, their best 5 guy lineup. As it stands, though, there's a lot of debate between starting Rui and starting Vanderbilt this year. Darvin Ham has said that he wants to start D'Angelo Russell. He's going to start Austin Reaves. He's going to start LeBron. He's going to start AD. In that group, I think there's arguments for both Rui and Vanderbilt there. Which way would you go?
Rui's a better player. There's no doubt. And here's the thing: like if he has attached himself to LeBron's hip all summer and just become this even better offensive weapon than what he was in the playoffs last year, then maybe there could just be so much offensive firepower in that unit that you don't care. Because there's a version of the story where Austin, D'Lo, Rui, LeBron, AD is just impossible to guard. Like that, there's a version of this scenario where that happens. But chances are he's going to be marginally better offensively than he was last year. He is a better player than Jared Vanderbilt, but I have to look at it from the standpoint of filling roles on the roster. And like, to me, Rui actually functionally plays the same position as LeBron, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually think he makes a lot more sense to essentially be LeBron's sub, the guy that comes in for LeBron. And then you find minutes for him at the 3 in the meat and potatoes in the game just to make sure he's playing, 28, 30 minutes a game. Yeah. But like, you have to have somebody, because like, look at the Western Conference up and down the line. It's like, okay, we're playing Denver. Who's guarding Jamal Murray? Okay, we're playing Phoenix. Who's guarding Devin Booker? Okay, we're playing Golden State. Who's guarding Steph Curry? Okay, we're playing Memphis. Who's guarding Ja Morant? I can go down in the line. I'm not going to keep going, but you get the point. Like the Western Conference has just an unending, like murder's row of dominant pick and roll ball handlers, and you just have to say
everything, but especially those guys.
Yeah. But especially those guys, and so like I think. At the end of the day, it makes the most sense to me to set the tone with Jared Vanderbilt at the start of the game, at the point of attack, and just see what he brings offensively in that unit. And then you bring in the subs, and then you come in with Gabe Vincent and have him take primary point of attack assignments and come in with Rui. And here's the thing, Gabe Vincent has playoff limitations. He got attacked a lot in mismatches last year, but he is a committed defender who can ball pressure and who could chase over the top of screens. So like he can functionally play that point of attack defense role in the regular season better than an Austin or D'Lo can, just because he's a quicker, more nimble athlete getting over the top of screens. And so like that kind of that Gabe Rui tandem to me makes sense alongside like a Jared Vanderbilt with D'Angelo Russell type of tandem. That to me is like the best way to structure this. And then as far as Darvin Ham goes with the closing group, it's all matchup dependent. Like if you're going against a team where it's more of a big wing that's taking all their shots at the end of the game, like you can keep Rui in the lineup and maybe he can guard that guy, but you just have to make those decisions on the fly. And I don't, I've seen a lot of people say like, who's the best 5 for the Lakers? Who's the closing 5 for the Lakers? And the truth of the matter is they have legitimately like 6 or 7 guys who could play that role. And I think that's actually an advantage in the long run. And not to mention, with the forward depth, you could find yourself in a situation where you can afford to package D'Angelo Russell with one of those forwards and move them at the deadline and have it actually be like an intriguing trade package, like Rui Hachimura, for instance, on an affordable deal. And I love Rui and hopefully it all works out for him with the Lakers. But like the depth there buys you the ability to make that type of move. I just think in the long run, there's one of two directions they need to go. They either need to go all in on being the best defense in the league, which is target a better point of attack defender that can play with the starters, or find that crazy over the top shot maker that elevates them into a dominant half court offense. And that's going to be a decision they have to make based on what's available at the deadline. But I'm intrigued because right now I'm not sure any one of their specific identities is, truly world-beating elite right now. But they have so many different identities that they can embody. And so that's what's kind of interesting about this team.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, really quickly before we move on, I do want to say the nice thing about whenever the Lakers do look to make an upgrade here is that this year they won't be operating from a point of desperation. They won't walk into any one of those negotiations where the other team knows, hey, they have to get rid of Russ. They had, every conversation that Rob Pelinka was having with whoever he was having it with was all about, we know you have to do something. This year, though, I feel like he can push away from the table, and that opens up your opportunities there. The point about, kind of grouping Vincent and Rui, and then Vanderbilt and Russell, I think, is the big one to hit there. And sometimes you'll kind of mix and mash some of those guys, but I think when you're talking about optimizing the rotation and making it make the most sense, those four guys kind of have to be split on like their own pickleball teams essentially, and you make it work as such. And the nice thing about all four of those guys is that all four of them fit alongside LeBron, alongside AD, alongside Austin Reaves. And, that you couldn't quite say that necessarily about Russ or even about Dennis Schroeder at some times. Like I thought last year, the reason that Denver really, dominated the Lakers late in games was the Lakers had four guys and then they had to play Schroeder. This year, they'll have, like you said a second ago, they'll have seven guys that I feel fairly comfortable going into those games. And it just kind of depends on who's having a night. If MPJ is going nuts, then yeah, you can stick, you can throw Rui in there. And all of this also is predicated on LeBron and AD, even if they aren't shooting like they did in the bubble in 2020, which is never happening again. But if they shoot like tangibly better than they did last year, like you can use Vanderbilt a little bit more. I always thought Vanderbilt, faded late in those series because not only were teams already know the book is written on Vanderbilt, but on top of that, AD wasn't a deep threat, and LeBron especially was way worse from the perimeter than he's been most of his career. So you combine those three things, and Vanderbilt is unplayable in that kind of a setting. This year, though, if I think Austin, you never know with quotes like this. You never hear like, per Austin Reaves, AD can't throw a pea in the ocean. Like that never happens. Right. We're really nervous.
You guys wouldn't believe how awful AD looks.
Yeah, right. He's actually tried shooting with his left hand. We're a little nervous. But you do hear like, Reaves is saying that AD is shooting the ball, it's noticeably better, which that phrasing, the thing about Austin is he seems incapable of bullshit. So like when he says noticeably better, that's in comparison to the AD that we saw struggle all year last year. And frankly, since they got out of the bubble. So if he's shooting a little bit better, if LeBron is shooting a little bit better, that actually makes Vanderbilt a much better player, a much more dynamic offensive player.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And like, that's the thing is like, when I look, we talked about Phoenix, LA earlier, but kind of zooming in on the LA Denver matchup, like I may or may not have said this last week when we were talking, but the three big reasons why I thought they lost that series was D'Angelo Russell got his ass kicked by Bruce Brown, like just got utterly demolished by Bruce Brown. It was one of the biggest swing factors in the series, but it's a general mismatch with that Lakers backcourt. They're not very athletic. And so really athletic guards can cause problems. Now, but let's address that. Bruce Brown is gone now. I like Christian Brown, but Christian Brown is not close to as good as Bruce Brown was. Okay.
No.
So like the Denver backcourt athleticism thing, not as much of an issue. When you go to other teams in the West, the Nuggets, the Suns, their backcourt is not overly athletic. When you go to Golden State, their backcourt's not overly athletic. John Morant is or big. Like the one team that you look at is like, oh, like what if they got into a series with the Clippers and it's like Terrence Mann and Russell Westbrook just kicking their ass, But but obviously Russ brings a bunch of other negatives to the table that the Lakers would exploit. So, but I'm less concerned about the backcourt athleticism issue with this specific Western Conference now. But that was a key issue in the Nuggets series. Then you have the backup center position. Like they just had to go out there all playoff runs, the entire playoff run with LeBron anchoring these center units with AD off the bench. And it was just a nightmare. And LeBron's plus minus in the playoffs was awful as a big part of that specific issue. Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood, I don't necessarily think are going to fix that problem. We'll see. And we'll see what happens over the course of the series, or season. But that's one thing to keep an eye on. The third big swing factor was every one of those games was close. Like 3 of the 4 games, were within 5 points with less than 5 minutes left. And the fourth
Lakers
one
had leads.
and the fourth one didn't have a clutch situation, but the Lakers had a double-digit lead in the third quarter. So like that was as far as sweeps go, and it was a sweep, and they got their butt kicked. And to be clear, I'm not trying to say like, oh, they were this close, but it was a closer sweep than it looked on the surface. And what happened at the end of every single one of those games is when both teams locked in defensively, Jokic and Jamal Murray made tough contested shot after tough contested shot in LeBron's face, in Anthony Davis's face, in everybody's face. And on the other end of the floor, LeBron was a brick and Anthony Davis was a brick. That was what happened in that series in those clutch situations. And so here's the thing. If I look at it, I would even argue Denver shot uncharacteristically hot in that series. They'll probably come back to earth a little bit if you play them again, but that still won't be enough. LeBron and AD also have to make more shots. And so that's the thing is like a lot of their I 100% agree with you. A lot of their problems can be solved just by LeBron James and Anthony Davis shooting better. If AD took it seriously this summer and worked on it, became a good jump shooter, that's great. LeBron, I have a feeling last year was a bit of an anomaly because he's had that happen a couple times in his career where he just randomly can't shoot, and then he comes back the next season and he's fine. He
also had that foot thing where like I've watched you shoot. You know what it's like. You try to shoot with anything wrong with your feet and you're way off. It's
an energy transfer thing. Yeah. Like when your muscle memory gets thrown off when your lift is off. Like it's because it's literally you take the same shot 1,000 times, you dial it in, and then it throws the whole the system off. But I think it's possible that LeBron comes back and shoots better, and AD comes back and shoots better, and that does solve a lot of their problems, especially with Bruce Brown out of the equation. But like that's a big if, and that's going to be the thing that they're going to have to figure out over the course of the season. Is it's like this big delicate concoction of ingredients, and it's like Jared Vanderbilt gets 10% better on offense, and Rui Hachimura gets 10% better on defense, and LeBron and AD both shoot better than they did last year. Then it all comes together and you're great. But like if that concoction is off a little bit, that's when you might have to consider getting more aggressive at the deadline.
What do you think about Austin? A lot. So the FIBA tournament was interesting, and also not all that surprising. The reaction to Austin in it, where Lakers fans and people who have watched him said, "No, I swear, this guy's actually good. It's not just because he's white. I promise. Like he's actually good." And then he got picked on in a variety of ways throughout that tournament. And it is something that, teams are going to do more of this year, especially in that playoff setting, because if you can manage to take him off the court in any way whatsoever, or make the Lakers give up something by having him on the court, then I think you've really done your job. Are you at all concerned about the defense?
Not at all. The reality is I'm actually pulling up the numbers really quick right now. Last year in the playoffs, they played teams that had matchup attacking players that could have caused problems. And I'm seeing right here that Austin Reaves got posted up in the entire playoff run on 6 possessions, and he gave up just 2 points. Yeah. So like it was just a complete non-issue in the playoffs last year. A lot of it is schematic, and you guys saw Austin Reaves talk about this in his interview with Zach Lowe. But like, if Steve Kerr's going to switch action and leave guys on an island, and they're allowed to, like he said, just take as many dribbles as it takes to get to their spot, like that's a really tough spot to defend for any player, And like the Lakers, here's the thing: there was a brief moment in the Grizzlies series, Game 4, Game 5, where I was like, oh, like Desmond Bane's a little too strong for Austin. Yeah. And he's able to kind of bump him off for some of these mid-range jump shots and get good looks, and that's kind of a little bit of a problem. But there was never a point during the playoffs last year where I was like, oh, Austin's defense can't play. Problem. Like, it just was never an issue. Like, there was never a point where I was like, Austin's the reason they're losing this game. Like, it was always like the delicate balance between the forward spot, or D'Angelo Russell and his incredible up and down style of play, where it's like 1 minute he's kicking the ball all over the floor and not playing any defense. And then the next minute he's hitting 3 of the most important threes of the season against Memphis in game 4. Like it's very volatile elsewhere. And I look at Austin as one of like the foundational pieces that like you just don't have to worry about. Like as long as he's healthy and he's out there, like he's just going to find a way to be a huge net positive. And I think, the problem with the public opinion on Austin is it's all about perspective. Like we're not here saying Austin's an all-star. And like, who knows, maybe one day he'll get a selection if he's lucky, if he's on a team that wins enough games and the conference breaks a certain way. But like that position is just super deep. And so it's hard, Jamal Murray is going to have a hard enough time making his first all-star team, even with Dame.
He doesn't want it anyway. Now. So we're good. Yeah.
but that's the thing is like, we're not Lakers. People who have covered the Lakers closely are not saying Austin's an all-star, Austin's a superstar. We're just saying he's really damn good. I look at him as legit. A guy, he's going to be a perennial, whatever that tier is right below all-star. That's what I see him as. Like Logan, who's one of the executives here at The Volume, is a good friend of mine. Like he was the first person I heard say he's like Manu Ginobili. And I think it's like literally the perfect comp in the sense that like he's not this world-beating talent. He's never going to go into an NBA season and average 27 points a game. He's not going to get all the accolades, but in any playoff setting or in any big game, when that dude has the ball, he is just as capable of making a game-altering, series-altering, championship-altering play as anybody out there. And when you are putting a team together and you look at a lineup and you see Manu in the group or you see Austin in the group, you're like, we're good there. Like, and that's the thing is like he's just really damn good. And I think that the dissonance there is mostly just people think we're overrating Austin, and that's not what we're doing. We're just trying to get people to appreciate and respect how good he is at this point. And hopefully over the course of the season, people will see that.
Yeah, I agree with just about everything you're saying. I think the one difference between last year's playoffs and these playoffs is I think teams are going to be more focused on getting him off of the court, right? He's going to be a bigger part of what like last year was everything he did was such a surprise, even to me. And I was, banging the drum for him from day one. I was like, this guy, like, I remember he had a game against Utah where it was one of those games that the Lakers had to win down the stretch of the season. Utah was also competing for the play-in / playoffs. They were essentially, and LeBron was basically giving Reaves the ball at the top of the key. He was running pick and roll with AD, and he was just taking 15-footer after 15-footer, and it was nails, right? I was like, holy shit, this is actually who this guy is. Not because he made those shots, but because LeBron noticed that he's that guy, right? Yeah. LeBron is giving him the ball. I'm like, all right, so this is legit. We know that now. But still, the fact that he, like, in 2 years went from undrafted to that is still kind of surprising. But now he's here. Now he got paid. Now he's here. And now he's going to be starting. He's going to be on everybody's game plan going in. And I do kind of think that he's probably going to be targeted a little bit more because teams have to find a way to minimize him in some way. But I think the Lakers are very well positioned across their roster to make up for him being targeted, right? If it's a smaller guard that pulls him way out onto the perimeter and they get into the paint, the Lakers have enough length. Poor John Morant was taking 17-foot floaters against AD. He didn't want any part of the rim. So that helps. If some team decides to post him up, the nice thing about post-up is they're usually relatively slow-moving actions, so you can swing somebody over there and force that guy to, at the very least, turn over the shoulder he's a little less comfortable turning over. So even if teams do target him more than they did last year, I think it's going to wind up being a net positive for the Lakers because it's like you mentioned the Warriors. If the Warriors are putting somebody out on an island against anybody, who's a league average defender, that is significantly less effective than their typical sets where you have Steph running all over the place, you have Clay running all over the place, you have Steph in the pick and roll and stuff like that. Anything that like gets the Warriors to not do that is doing the defense's job. So I'm fine with that. I do think he's going to get targeted more, but I think he and the Lakers are positioned well enough that he's going to get better. And I think Rui also mentioned that he looks bigger this year than he looked last year, which again, like we said earlier, everybody has gained 15 pounds of muscle during the summer and all of that stuff. And nobody says anything bad about their offseason or their training camp. But I tend to believe hype about this guy because we know he puts the work in. You did mention D'Angelo Russell, and I did say that I think eventually he's going to get moved, and this will be the last thing before we get you out of here. Do you see a world in which the Lakers, he plays well enough to have the Lakers say, you know what, I think we'll keep him. We'll see how this thing goes. We'll roll with this roster that we have. Do you think that'll be up to him, or do you think it'll be more of a, hey, we still have a need and he's our most movable contract? But do you see Russell taking a step forward into being more of a 16-win player than he is an 82-game player?
One of the things that I thought hurt him in particular was his catch and shoot jump shot also fell apart in the Nuggets series. And like D'Angelo Russell, he has like we've all seen him do that little left shoulder fade to attack smaller guards. He did that a lot to Steph Curry in the Warriors series. He hit several of the biggest shots of the postseason. He hit the 3 shots that kept the Grizzlies game close, which allowed LeBron to kind of lift them over the top. A lot of people don't remember this, but game 1 of the Warriors series, the Warriors had this crazy flurry to tie the game, and then D'Lo literally untied it the very next possession with a nice little left-handed bank shot on the by the left block on like just a quick transition attack. Like he made a lot of really big plays, and what happened was he ran into a really bad matchup, and in the process lost his confidence and lost one of the most important things that he brings on a possession by possession basis to the Lakers, which is he's actually a really damn good spot up player who's very aggressive. And like when you position him specifically, he's good at above the break spot up shooting, which there's just not a ton of guys in the league that are great at that, but that can also do other things well. And so you position him on the wing, and when you put that defender down to the nail, he can catch and fire, and it's a real weapon, and he's going to hit that shot on a catch and shoot at like 42% of the time. And like, so the thing is again, like it's, I want to try to, I'm more concerned in the bigger picture about just like him taking out some of the mistakes he made in the playoff run, because I thought there was tons and tons of good there. But at the end of the day, like you got to look at it from the standpoint of redundancy and the use of resources. D'Angelo Russell's taking up $18 million of your cap. So like how much is that an appropriate amount of money to spend on a guy who on a possession by possession basis is a dominant spot up player who's a below average defender? Like that's where you have to start asking yourself, even though D'Lo is very good and is capable of helping this team in different ways, would you get a more, winning return, so to speak, if you found a player that had a different skill set that filled different roles? Because I would argue that like it'd be a lot easier to replace D'Angelo Russell's shooting than it would be to replace the obvious need that the team has at the point of attack or the over the top shooting that we were talking about. So again, I don't think there's any sort of regular season performance you could see out of him that would take away that decision. It's a philosophical decision based on matchups that occur in the playoffs. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to who's available. Like I would not flip D'Angelo Russell at the deadline for Jordan Clarkson, for instance, if that makes sense. No. Like it's got to be the right type of player that justifies the trade-off for the good of what D'Angelo Russell brings versus the rest. And before you try to kick me out of here, I thought we were going to talk some Ahsoka today, man.
Well, I was going to ask if you had a little time to stick around to do that. I forgot. We've talked about any variety of things, and it sounds like your 2 biggest questions about the Lakers are the point of attack defense and the over the top shooting. Is there essentially the cool thing about the league this year is I think you could very quickly identify with each team the thing that might get in the way of them not, even beyond injuries, right? Because injuries are always going to get in the way. But I think with each team, there's a certain matchup that like can't be made up for. There's a certain thing that a team can do defensively that, can just stall them just enough. And I think here with the Lakers, I think there are a couple of those things too. What's the biggest question you have about the Lakers?
Well, see, that's interesting too, because I 100% agree. They all have a flaw there. Like Boston is still like, is Tatum going to be able to out execute the best guys in the league in the half court? The Bucks have an even worse perimeter defense predicament than the Lakers have, right? The Nuggets, their defensive front line, again, like everyone's like, oh, they defended well in the playoffs. And it's like, did you look at the offenses they played? They played Minnesota, who's a terrible half-court offense, the Lakers, who are a terrible half-court offense, and the Miami Heat, who are a terrible half-court offense. Like, and I'm not trying to sit there and say like they don't deserve the championship. Of course they do, but the point is like there's a version. The Nuggets
it's a question mark.
The Nuggets are not a dominant defense. They just put up a decent defensive rating against bad playoff offenses. And they're a bona fide champion, but they're not a perfect basketball team. They are beatable. Okay.
Right.
That's their big question mark. The Suns, we're talking about their defensive front line. And then the Lakers, we were just mentioning those specific issues. I would say that the over the top shot making is probably the biggest concern for me. And the reason why I say that is like, I'm a big believer in like, you can find a way to get stops through commitment and through the schematic approach that takes place over a 7-game series. For instance, like I didn't even think it was point of attack defense that got them beat against the Nuggets. It was they just couldn't figure out how to guard Jokic. Like I thought they defend a lot of those Jamal Murray shots were tough shots that he was making. It's not like you're going to do demonstrably better there. But what really hurt them is they couldn't go blow for blow for them in any sort of extended capacity from shot making, from the standpoint of shot making. And so that's the big thing I would look at. And again, like everything just comes down to LeBron and AD. Like those two guys, if they come in and they make shots this year, it just solves so many more of their issues. Like LeBron was atrocious as a jump shooter last year. It was a real problem. And you can even look down to specific shots. Like you're like, oh, if he made that 3 against Denver in game 1, they might win that game. You know, if he makes a couple more of the 3s that he took in game 3 against Denver, maybe they win that game. Like you can look at those all and see like they just every single time they needed a guy to make one of those shots, they just missed him every single time. Like can you think of a single important jump shot that LeBron or AD made in the playoffs this year? I can't think of one.
Statistically speaking, it was the most daunting, depressing stat. It was like LeBron is now 0 of 17 for 3 from 3 in the fourth quarter. It's like, I mean, it feels like 35, you know, like it felt even worse than the stat that was already depressing. It's just, you know, Aaron and I, we talk every week and we analyze and we reanalyze and we overanalyze this team, because that's what you do on a team-based show. And it always just winds up coming back to, is AD going to be a threat? Like there have been stretches over the last few years where AD doesn't even look at the basket from deep, right? There have been, and even LeBron, for some stretches, a team will be going under the screen from him or, you know, on him when he has the ball at the top of the key. And you know that the move there is to take the shot. And even he's kind of hesitating on it. And that's like literally the greatest scorer of all time is kind of hesitant to pull the trigger on something. And if that remains the case, then the Lakers become guardable, and that defense has to be that much more elite. And I don't think you can have an elite defense when your point of attack defenders are Gabe Vincent, Austin Reaves, or D'Angelo Russell. So, yeah, I think they need to find... They either need to, like you're talking about, fully buy into the identity of just beating the crap out of everybody on a night-to-night basis defensively, and then hope that LeBron and AD can withstand that kind of approach, because that is a very difficult approach to basketball. Or they need to find, like the trade that I'm kind of keeping my eye on over the course of the year is, because Kuz is always flirting with the Lakers, always. And
God, he'd be perfect.
Yeah, like if the Lakers were able to, and I'd have to look at the contracts and stuff and the numbers here, but if it's D'Lo and Rui for Kuz, that completes your starting 5. I think you're good. You know, I think that
can Kuz guard on the perimeter well enough, you think?
I think the offense would be just so devastating that, you know, Kuz has become so effing good, both as, you know, starting possessions with the ball in his hand, and let alone like the ball swinging over to him and having a second to have the defense kind of rotating over to him that I don't know. It would be an identity shifting thing, and then you're hoping to keep up with offenses like Phoenix's and Denver's and stuff like that. But that's the move that I'm keeping my eye on because I think that makes their offense up there, puts their offense up there, and B, I'm keeping my eye on because I know how Rob Pelinka operates and he brings back guys. he just he likes to bring back people. All right, that I think is going to do it here for the basketball aspect of this, the Lakers aspect of this. For those of you who watched all of Ahsoka, which is now fully wrapped on Disney Plus, stick around. We are going to talk about that. And again, for those of you who are departing, find Jason's stuff, Hoops Tonight, on the Volume. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere that you find podcasts. And it's great stuff. It's tremendous information. It's really fun and entertaining and engaging. But yeah, I am curious. So Jason, you do host the Two Sons podcast. It's kind of your passion project about Star Wars and stuff. I tuned into a little bit of your post series, I guess, or season wrap up of Ahsoka. Now that it's 8 episodes gone, I kept finding myself like as episode 8 was wrapping up, I kept finding myself looking like, are you sure it's not 9? Are you sure it's not 9? Like, are you sure that this isn't a 9 episode run? Which compared to recent, especially Marvel stuff, I think that's a step in the right direction for Star Wars. The fact that a show was wrapping up and I was looking for more. That has not necessarily been the case. And I think this was an important series for Star Wars to nail and for Disney to nail. And I still had some gripes, but I think overall this was what I was hoping for.
Yeah, there's this repetitive thing that's been going on. I mean, even through the Mandalorian show, but I mean, the sequel trilogy was the best example of this. Like, let's just rebrand the Empire and rebrand. They wouldn't even let them fight against the Republic. They're like, actually, we need to have like rebels, so we're going to have the Resistance, which is like this weird group of people that kind of is because they wanted to create the underdog, we're ill-equipped mentality, which is kind of unrealistic when they're the power in charge of the galaxy and would in theory have control of all the shipyards and all that stuff. So like they literally were so obsessed with like recycling a Star Wars concept that it gets so boring and redundant. And like I love the direction Dave Filoni's taking this with this like kind of mysterious entity that exists in this other galaxy. I'm a little annoyed that they didn't reveal just like 10% more before the end of the season because it's so vague. Like it's like, okay, here's this power that's so terrifying that it scared Thrawn. Like Thrawn was scared in that entire season. You could tell he's like, I don't care what happens, just get me the hell out of here, you know?
Right.
And then like the Night Mothers are like, get us out of here. Like even Ezra's like, get us out of here. Like everyone just wants to leave. And so they're trying to get you scared of something different. And I'm such a fan of that concept. I just wish they would have like had Balin standing on the father at the beginning of the episode and then maybe given us like 2 additional clips kind of like further hinting at whatever this thing is, because they revealed the Mortis gods, but the Mortis gods are dead. So it's like a reveal of characters that theoretically no longer exist in the Star Wars universe. And so now there's all these theories and I won't get into them here, but like, I wish they would have just given us like 10% more of a hint, but I am excited about the idea of like Thrawn going home and just messing everybody up for a while and just causing havoc. But then this other entity joining the equation and it turning into a very complicated conflict where it's not very like, dark side versus light in the standpoint of like the Empire versus the Republic, but more like convoluted and with different types of entities. I'm just excited for different Star Wars, man. I'm so down.
Yeah, I'm happy that like Thrawn at least explains, because the problem with like the most recent trio of movies that we had was that like you start it and you're like, wait, didn't they win? Like how are we back? Like, and I throughout that last set of movies that we went through, I just kept on like at some point you have to explain how the hell we got back to the Empire being in power again, and like part of that, they've started to touch on that, and you're starting to see the maddening, like, we're just trusting people. They say they're not fascists anymore, and it's like, promise, like, we swear, cross our heart, hope to die, like we do not, we don't support the Empire anymore. And then you're finding out that, like, yeah, it turns out taking them at their word was probably not the best move forward there. And Thrawn at least explains, like, really putting that into hyperdrive, right? So that when the next trio of movies do eventually start, you could see how Thrawn, even though he kind of sort of has to get nixed along the way before then, will, like, he's he's enough of a destabilizing factor that you can arrive where we arrived by the time that the last three movies started. I'm happy that they started taking care of that. I really wish we would have, like, there was so much throat clearing in the first few episodes, and then you see them really kind of scramble at the very end to land the plane. And I really wish we would have gotten, because Ezra Thrawn was the conflict of an entire series, and they were never even in the same room together. Like they
never had a conversation. Yeah.
Right. And
Ezra rode back across the pathway with him, and they still didn't have like Ezra ran into Thrawn thing. Nothing. Like,
yeah, I wish we would have, like, gotten rid of the whole Sabine Ahsoka thing, or not gotten rid of, but spent a little less time there so that we could come over here and spend more time on the actual conflict that is going to drive the story. Because that's what's going to drive the story forward, from here on out, is going to be Thrawn trying or gaining his foothold, and Ezra, trying to bring Sabine and Ahsoka back somehow, and trying to move on and bring those guys back. And I just don't see how they don't lay any groundwork there. Because, like, for you and I, we watched Rebel. You watched Rebels, I would imagine.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Uh-huh.
So we know about that. We know about that conflict. We spent years with that conflict. But for people who only watch live action stuff, they're like, what? Why should I care about this kind of chubby blue guy and this, like, bearded weirdo? Like, what? Why should I care? And then we didn't spend any time explaining that.
Yeah, and Thrawn is, like, arguably one of the most interesting Star Wars characters in existence, if not, like he's top 3 for me. Like, I find him to be so fascinating. Those of you guys who haven't read them, the Thrawn books are literally unbelievable. Highly recommend the audiobook version because the voice actor does an incredible job, and they spend a good amount of time in post-production just, like, adding, that kind of movie type of flair to it. But I agree. And, like, and it's funny when you were saying I kind of feels like there should be a 9th episode. Like, I agree with the point you were trying to make, which is, like, I want more, which is a good thing. But, like, it actually felt like it needed a 9th episode to me, because it just felt like there just needed to be a little bit more flushing out of those characters. And I think if I had to guess what Dave Filoni's ideology was, or his thought process was, I guess he wanted to kind of stay on Ahsoka as much as possible for what the show is called. And I wouldn't be surprised if this entire storyline gets divided into 2 shows now. And we get one season of, like, Thrawn versus Ezra over here, and then we get a season of, basically Sabine versus Shin Hati and Ahsoka versus Baylan Skoll, who presumably they're going to recast at this point. And and then those stories can kind of get flushed out on their own, and then they'll bring them together down the line. I mean, Mandalorian kind of had that ending where the circle closed in around Grogu and the Mandalorian. So, like, that kind of makes you feel like that storyline is over, which means obviously the Mandalorians have regained control of Mandalore. So it kind of feels like these are the 2 shows now that are going on in this era, is Ahsoka season 2 and potentially a show called Thrawn, right? Or something along something
or even
along
Ezra,
those
right?
lines.
Like,
or even Ezra.
Or
Rebel season
the planet
6.
that they were on, the planet
Dathomir.
Because, like, no, not the one that he was going to, but the planet that he and that Ezra and Thrawn were stuck on. Right?
Oh, Peridia.
So, yeah. So, like, you could call because I'm actually really fascinated in that, the process by which Thrawn got all his stuff, and Ezra apparently was just chilling with some shelled people. Like, Thrawn's over here doing everything and relaunching the Empire, and Ezra's just like, building
On a
fires with
sabbatical.
sticks.
Yeah. And honestly, it's really funny. Did you watch? Have you seen the Mortis God episodes?
Yes, yeah,
Okay, I literally rewatched them last night, and
so
it
good.
is so profound too, because like Obi-Wan literally says he's not even sure if they're in the same galaxy anymore. So presumably they could have teleported to wherever this place was. The actual place of Mortis was not a planet; it was like a prism, like some sort of weird geode that was like an extended diamond shape, and it almost looked like a giant space station. And that same symbol is visible on Peridia in the distance, like standing on top of a mountain in light. And so like it's very possible that and there's like some really deep lore stuff where like you actually find out the Mortis gods lived elsewhere and then left to get away from this other character, which we won't get into, that where they ended up at Mortis basically as a way to escape and to protect themselves and to hide. And so like it's super interesting to see the direction this all is going, but like it's like I can't believe they didn't just give us like 10% more, like just a little bit more, because like with the writer strike, presumably it could be a long time before we actually get to what's next. And the show's going to take a big, or the entire Star Wars universe is going to take a turn right now, because we have the next book in the High Republic series is coming out on November like 11th or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like 5 weeks away. And then the show that's coming out in the spring is The Acolyte, which is set in the High Republic. And so like, it's like this huge cliffhanger before Star Wars, like just detours to an entirely different time frame. And so I am definitely wishing it ended a tiny bit differently, but I will say, and I'm not sure about you, Anthony, but like I experienced the most what's the word I'm looking for? I experienced like almost like a visceral like excitement for this show that I hadn't experienced for any Star Wars content since the old stuff, and like when I was a kid. And so like that to me, I will be forever grateful to Dave Filoni for, because like I didn't even know I could still get that excited about something. So like it's cool. It's cool that he did that.
I was watching every night at, it's let's see, they aired at 9 Eastern, right? So 8 my time. Every night,
You're in Texas, right?
I am, yeah. So I was as soon as I could watch, and week in, week out, I was watching as quickly as possible, and not even necessarily to avoid spoilers. I was watching because I wanted to watch it. And I that has not been the case since like Mandalorian season 1. Even like as we got to Mandalorian season 2, I was like
it's cool. Mandalorian was cool. It just wasn't deeply impactful. Does that make sense? Like it didn't feel that important in the grand scheme of Star Wars.
I kind of wonder if they're going to find a way, because I agree with you that like I could see them closing up the story where they did. It was like that. It's a Western, right? So it was them like staring out into the sunset in the way that like all Westerns end. So I could see it ending there, but I also think he's such a popular character, and Grogu is such a possible and hugely potentially impactful, where this guy could be a mix between Mandalorian and Jedi cultures and have all of those powers. Like that guy just being in the background from here on out just doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, my last like kind of gripe with the show was they arrive at this planet that's in a completely different galaxy, right? And it's like, and especially now, seeing as we've kind of sort of been on this planet before and we kind of know what it looks like. I wish they would have done a little bit more to make Peridia look more foreign. It looked like Indio, like it.
Yeah, it just looked like another planet in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, I wish they would have done more. Like, we saw a little bit of flora and fauna, but it was just kind of like another planet, and given the gravity of like the powers that be there, I feel like it has to look a little bit better than I would drive on my way to Morongo. It needs to look a little bit better than that.
Hey, I'm with you, man. I remember thinking like, what are they going to see when they come out on the other side of this portal? And then when it was just like literally another, and like literally the zoomed out view looked like Wobani, that prison planet that they rescued the Stardust at in Rogue One, and I'm with you on that. And like especially when we know now too that this is loosely tied to the Mortis gods, and the Mortis gods were on like weird space stations. Like if they would have shown up and seen that giant prism thing, I'd have been like, oh, okay, what's happening now? You know, like this.
Right.
I'm with you on that. Like, but I think it's going to get weirder. Like, I think that season 2 of whatever the Thrawn Ezra thing is going to follow a pretty standard Star Wars pathway. It's going to be fleets. It's going to be battles. It's going to be hopefully a good opportunity for them to demonstrate what Thrawn actually is, which is a genius military commander, which this show didn't really have the ability to demonstrate because he's basically just doing a cargo transfer and running, you know?
Yeah.
But like that show, I feel like is going to follow a more standard kind of storyline. The Ahsoka season 2, with everything going on Peridea in season 2, I think is going to get weird. And I'm super down for that. I'm so down for weird. I that's what I want. I want it to go off the rails completely.
Yeah, it was like a central issue that I had with Game of Thrones as it was wrapping was how they were like literally killing all of the fantastical elements of the show, where they were like, oh yeah, sure, this one arrow flew up and shot this dragon right through the neck with like 0 odds whatsoever. Like they were like literally killing what I thought was like the best elements of a fantasy story, right? They were turning it into this human thing where like we aren't interesting. Like if I want human...
We're profoundly uninteresting.
Yeah, like if I want human disaster, I could just read history. Give me like dragons, give me magic, give me that stuff. And I did kind of feel like, and I think like part of why I started with me being so excited for a 9th episode of this series, or hoping for a 9th episode of the series, was that like it felt like Dave Filoni, like walking more casual audiences kind of by the hand, holding them by the hand and being like, hey, I promise this is going to make sense. Just follow me with this. Because I've watched those animated series with Jen, who is a Star Wars fan, but is nowhere near the nerd I am. And she'll be like, this is Star Wars? Like, what?
What?
When was the last time? Yeah. And I feel like this was Dave Filoni really kind of grabbing Jen's type of viewer by the hand and saying like, just wade into these waters with me, and I promise I'll steer you okay. And the fact that like we are going towards that kind of stuff where Game of Thrones moves so far away from it, I would be a huge hypocrite if I had a problem with this direction. And I have zero problem with it whatsoever. It's actually what makes me so excited about the future of Star Wars.
Yeah, well, they've overdone the bigger fleets, bigger ships, bigger Death Stars thing. Like they've just overdone that.
Yeah.
Like it was comical the what they did in Rise of Skywalker with like the tens of thousands of ships versus the tens thousands of Death Stars. Like it was just ridiculous. And that's what's cool is what they haven't done is gone over the top in the weird elements of the Force. And so that's the direction I want to see them go. And so I'm so down, man. This was fun. I had a good time talking some Star Wars.
It is always a blast, man. Again, you can find Jason's stuff. If you liked the Star Wars aspect of this, Two Sons Podcast is where you want to find that. If you are both basketball and Star Wars, then Hoops Tonight and Two Sons is where you're going to find all of his stuff. Jason, always a blast. Again, greatly appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us here. I look forward to talking to you a bunch over the course of the season.
Hell yeah, man. Looking forward to next time.